Hi, I'm Chad Dezern, and I'm the studio director of Insomniac Games in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm also the creative director of the Unspoken.
So, what were your goals heading into this, which I believe is your second VR game?
That's right. Right. We released Edge of Nowhere, and also we're working on Feral Rights, and also this, the Unspoken. And with this one, we saw the touch controllers at last E3, and we immediately thought we want to cast spells with our bare hands using touch controls in VR. It was this sort of group magic in the real world fantasy we've all had for a while.
How has your experience in developing for VR now across multiple platforms, titles, helped with this game?
We've just been able to experiment a lot. We've tried a lot of things in third person. We've tried different ways of getting the narrative across. We've tried out a lot of different cameras, movement schemes, a little bit of everything. So when it came time to start up the Unspoken, we could move pretty quickly to prototyping what our final core mechanics were. We tried a lot of different types of teleportation, but we ended up with a point to teleport scheme that works really well for a game that's about magic.
Creatively, what is VR opening up with you guys as you experiment and explore it?
It's a lot about the ability to put the player in a place that is changing around you, to get an experience that you can only have by feeling like you're in a real location. So what I mean is, in arenas in the Unspoken, everything changes over time. As more magic permeates the atmosphere around you, the atmosphere changes dramatically, things start breaking, the world kind of comes undone a little bit as you're in this space, and it's the sort of feeling that we can only get with VR because you can look around at all of these events as they're happening.
Can you talk a little about the world and what's going on in the story?
Yeah, so the Unspoken takes place in Chicago in right now. It takes place in the real world. And our version of Chicago has an underworld of magic that's always just below the surface. And even to go back farther, Chicago hosted the World's Fair in 1893. And for a lot of people, that was the first time they'd ever seen electric lights. It was the first time they'd ever seen moving pictures. And fair visitors came away feeling like they had just seen real magic at work. And in the world of the Unspoken, it turns out they really had. So that was an irresponsible show of magic, and the fallout from that event has caused Chicago's underworld to fracture, and the world is still dealing with that event to this day. So from there, we launched the player into what amounts to an urban magic fight club, where you're going to different pocket dimensions around the city and getting into PvP spellcasting duels with other players.
We've seen a lot of early VR being more singular solo experiences. What does multiplayer in VR open up?
The main thing is that you can look and see your opponent's tracked head and hands. So you get this impression of real human movement that you can't get any other way. You can see all the weird quirks of people's body language. You can get a sense of what your opponent's looking at. You can watch what your opponent is casting from their spell inventory and then try to counter it. And it's caused a lot of sensations that I've never felt before when I'm playing. Like, I felt a person give me a dirty look in the game before, and that's brand new for VR and for this kind of head tracking. So it feels like this cool new thing.
Now, we've seen Edge of Nowhere. You have this game. Can you talk a little bit about the other games you guys are exploring in VR?
Yeah, we're also working on Feral Rights, which is a third-person game. It's a little bit like a God of War style perspective, where it's a lot about combat. Since it's VR, you're looking around sort of a jungle setting, like you feel like you're really in this rich world, and it's open world in that you're really determining where you go, but we move from screen to screen so that you don't get any discomfort as you move through the space.
What are the challenges of open world in VR?
Well, it's really all about the camera because your sense of locomotion doesn't work well if we move the camera. It's always got to be about your head and what you're looking at as the player. So movement schemes work well when the on-screen third-person avatar can move with the controller, but then the player always has complete freedom to look around the world and track what the player's doing. So within those constraints, we've worked out a scheme where you've got the open map, you can choose where you want to go, but we're moving from camera to camera in a way that keeps the freedom for the player without the downside of us completely directing the camera and taking it away from you.
How has your experience in the past with games like Resistance and Ratchet and Clank helped with exploring VR in that capacity?
Well, they've helped with our third-person games in particular because, we feel like we've done a lot of games where you're controlling a hero, we understand jump mechanics, movement, and we were able to use that as a baseline to start with, and then kind of layer all of the VR experimentation on top of that. Or with a game like the Unspoken, which is completely first-person, we were able to use a lot of the sort of camera engineering chops that we developed with the Resistance series, but then bring them into the VR space with your hands being like physically in front of you.